Onegaishimasu. Okay, and so Zen gives us a chance to tune in, come back in touch with ourselves, how we're feeling, how we're doing in our mind, in our thoughts, how we're doing in our body, how we're doing in our breathing. It's really easy for us to lose connection with ourselves, lose contact with ourselves, especially if we're very busy or we have a hectic schedule. So it's an opportunity to check in, tune in, release tensions, mental tensions, physical tensions, and reopen the body, resettle the mind, reopen the body, relax and open. So weight underside again is very helpful. Letting the weight settle to the lowest points without any collapsation. And very helpful to consciously use the out breath. So as you using your awareness and your intention, keeping your spine long and open. We mentioned before, a little further step beyond that is intending space between the vertebrae. That will automatically open you up, straighten you without being overly muscular about that. You just, with your intention, imagine and feel extra space between each vertebrae. Space is expanding a little bit, and that, in a sense, inflates you, opens you up without being bigger muscularly. So we want to open from the inside, literally take up more space physically, but not by in that kind of muscle person kind of action, but by literally increasing the space inside. Literally increasing the space between the joints. We start with the spine, but it's eventually going to be every joint. So physically, actually take up more space, but energetically, you'll feel like you're very, very much getting bigger and filling the room. Again, very helpful to consciously release tension with each out breath. And with each out breath, you're able to settle more weight settles underside, more settled, yet more open. So we have those two qualities, settled, which is kind of a down energy, weight underside, and open, which is not down, but outward, but two distinct different directions. Down, settling, and also releasing, opening. And then seeing how much you can release on each out breath. Kind of challenge yourself in a nice, friendly way. How much are you willing to let go on each out breath? How much tension can you allow to go with each exhale? Okay, rubbing your hands together. Use your intention to feel as if you are charging up your hands, electrifying your hands, charging them up, just like static electricity, rubbing a sweater. So place your mind, place your attention into your hands. You might feel them starting to warm up. And take those energized hands and lightly rubbing over the face, feeling as if you're smoothing out the energy just under the skin, all over the face, jaw, temples, forehead, sides of the neck, and then settle the hands in a lap. Notice your breath. And slowly coming up using the ground, the weight underside pushes you up. And just feel yourself for a moment in the standing. Imagine water dripping from your fingertips. Again, that's a very useful imagery for getting weight underside. So the opposite of weight underside is weight upper side, which is what everybody's doing in one degree or another. So weight underside. Imagine water dripping off the fingertips, as I mentioned, and or water running down every part of the body. Just like I mentioned, weight under side is actually every part of the body, the weight settles to the lowest points. You can imagine water actually dripping off your skin. Or it's quite nice sometimes just to do that at the fingertips. Release the abdomen, hang the hips, or if you're not ready for that, just point the tailbone directly to the ground. Not forward, not angling forward, but straight down. So the lower back becomes almost straight. And letting that straightening also extend up through the spine, so that will drop the chin ever so slightly. If we simply put space between the vertebrae, that'll make all those connections automatically. If I'm imagining and intending space, this will lengthen and straighten because I'm putting space between the vertebrae. And my neck, which so many people have this angle back and very tense back here, the muscles are shortened back here, the muscles are shortened here. If you're placing space, allowing space to increase through the whole spine, because we'll often forget about the neck, through the whole spine, then that will correct the chin level, the angle of the neck. When we talk mechanically dropping the chin, you won't have to do that mechanically. It'll happen for you, which is actually making the chin level. It'll feel like being dropped because most people are chronically up, chronically tight here. So if you're putting space between the vertebrae, including the vertebrae of the neck, it'll correct the alignment of the neck and the head, correct the entire length of the body. So if we kind of combine a couple of things, water dripping off the fingertips, the spine opening, growing longer by intending space between the vertebrae. And those of you, especially with more experience, or it might happen right away, as you intend space between the vertebrae, as the spine gets longer and opens, you'll feel the pressure in your feet increasing. Because again, the spine is doing this in both directions, up and down, hanging the hips, presses the feet into the ground, opening up the spine, presses the feet into the ground, and eventually you'll feel the pressure increase on the bottoms of the feet. That also is very releasing and relaxing, just like water dripping off the fingertips, just like letting gravity completely take the weight of the arms. Feeling the pressure increase in the bottoms of the feet is also both a sign that you're doing things correctly and also very releasing and soothing and relaxing in and of itself, consciously feeling that sensation. Add in consciously releasing your abdomen, you have a lot of things going on that's opening and releasing, getting almost totally universal and global through your entire body, through the things we've discussed so far, and opening, releasing. And then maintaining as much of that as you can as we go into some movement. And again, simply noticing when you lose some of those things and see if you can regain them by slowing down, being more conscious, more mindful in the movement, and maintaining those sensations and qualities. Then a long stance. Is the spine still opening or are you starting to contract? Because we're moving. So go back to allowing the spine to continue to open. That also means, again, hanging the hips. What's going to happen as we get tight and shortened here. Hang those hips. Other side. Equal awareness through both arms. Even though the arms seem to be going in different directions, doing different things, equal awareness, equal feeling. As we often say, key flow, equal key flow, energy flow, equal through both arms. You can also become very conscious of the hand blade, energize the hand blades. That helps equalize you out and energize your movement and your body. Enlivens the body. You energize the hand blades. And to the back corners, again, equal stretch through both sides of the body. Okay, sinking into the hips. You're going to draw a circle with your fingertips on the floor underneath you and behind you. Now come up by pushing your hips forward, pushing your hips forward. You're scooping up with the arms. That's happening because you're pushing your hips forward. Then you arch back a little bit, open up your chest, and then push forward and open up your back. Sink down into your hips. Inscribe a big circle underneath and behind you. Push the hips forward to scoop the hands forward. Arch back as you open up the chest. Open up the back by pushing forward and sinking into the squat. And then even further down. So the back stays straight, but you sink into the hips. Draw a circle underneath and behind you. Push the hips forward. Arch. Open up the chest. Open up the back as you sink into a squat. And then thinking straight down. Okay. So let's work on just the arm swing, forward and back, and then we'll work on that question that we had about the plane of the hips. Then we'll bring it into some of the other classical moves that we do. So pressing a couple other bases first. I press down to come back, I press down to go forward. Press down the front leg, that pushes me back. Press down the back foot, the ground pushes me forward. I hang out. And the arms are swinging, but the arms are just doing this. We're only swinging because of natural forces. Now, we want to continue to hang from the string, as sometimes we would say, or the spine is long and vertical and open. The hips are hanging, lots of different ways that we put it, slightly different angles of approaching it. Tailbone pointing towards the ground, another way of putting it. We want to maintain that. So everything we do in Zazen, things that we work on, everything that we work on in our standing, we want to take into our dynamic movement. All those qualities and principles and feelings we want in our movement. So when I go back, I don't want the hips to tilt back or the other way. When I go forward, I don't want to tilt either. So my hips stay at the same plane as if they're still hanging. So I want to watch out for any tilting here, or any sort of tilting here or here when I'm forward. So it's like the hips are on this even plane. It's like your upper body and hips are on rollers. And they're just sliding on these rollers. So the legs are doing the work, pressing down. And the hips are, and from the hips up, are just on rollers, just sliding. Now, for that to occur, to have that same hangingness, so hips are just hanging straight and flat, parallel to the ground. What that really requires physically is that I sit. I bend that back leg. Now, it's normal and natural that we avoid doing that because that takes a lot of work. It's basically a one-legged squat. I'm hanging out, but now on one leg. So that's why we'll tend not to do it. And there's could be a flexibility issue as well. That there's a bit of a, it's hard at first to get to keeping this flat and even. It could be, part of it could be flexibility, but mainly it's strength. One thing that's important to really point out here is that I don't want to send the hip out to the side. See that? So that might tend to happen where it's kind of angling out. You'll hip bump. So that's not good for the hip joint. It's not good for the ball joint. It's not good for the ligaments and tendons. So I don't want to send it out like that. Now that probably most people aren't doing it that much, but you don't want any of that outward motion. That also requires more strength to keep that alignment. So from the front view, I sit into that back leg and hip, but that doesn't mean bumping out. We'll often say in Tai Chi, we sit on the bar stool. We sit on the bar stool. I don't want to sit on the bar stool with one cheek. A lot of people do that, right? Though, right? You're kind of sitting partway on the bar stool, and so your hips are tilted. If I send my hip out like that, it's like sitting on the bar stool with one cheek. That's actually not good for the body and the alignment. I mean, literally on the bar stool, it's not a good way to sit. So I want to sit with both sit bones on the bar stool. I sit flush and flat on the bar stool. Now, when I have one leg in front of the other and I shift the weight to one leg, to the back leg, it's the same thing. So again, that requires more strength. So let's say I don't have a lot of strength here. My leg is kind of weak, or I'm not used to giving it that work. I'll be staying up here. See that? I'm up here. You can even see the angle of my belt. Because I'm kind of kinked up here. My leg is not straight, but it's not bending more. It needs to bend more when you go back. So I'll now bend my back leg. So now this is flat back here. So that's an extra bend back here, extra work. So when you shift the weight back, there's a bit of a sit. Otherwise, it'll tend to be a tilting of the hips and coming up. So that is a very, very good observation, a point to bring up, because we often don't mention that technically, specifically, when we shift the weight back, there's a sit or a bit of a squat, a little mini squat. There's a little extra drop, a little extra sit. Because if I don't, see how that's coming up a bit? I'm just thinking of going back straight without a sit. And it translates to a bit of a popping up. I need to have an actual mechanical bit of a sit. But again, not a bumping out. So that takes some good awareness and work and focus to get that, and to make sure and to prevent a bumping out or prevent a popping up back here. So you really want to do this in front of a mirror or the screen, if you can see yourself in the screen, because you can't tell 100% just by feeling it at first. You have to get a visual as well. So you can go with just shifting of the weight. So that means that when you shift the weight back, you're sitting down a bit. You're sitting down a bit, keep the hips flat. Notice if you're popping up. And then we can take that into a Funakoki Endo, any weight shift. So it's as if you're hanging from the string, so everything stays parallel, even, or that the upper body is on rollers, so you don't bump up. It's the same level. So again, technically that means the back leg bends a bit more, you sit down a little bit. So that actually hasn't really been mentioned much. So that's a very, very good point to bring up. Of course, the same thing for Minucci. Now, jump on the unmute button and let me know if you have any questions or comments about this. Maybe something's bothering you or you're not sure what I mean about, bumping out. Let me know what your comments or questions are. So unmute yourself and let me know. But yes, unfortunately, really fortunately, that means that's extra work on the leg, that's back and hip. So it's a bit more of a sit. We call it a sit. It's a bit more of a bend, sink, like a mini squat. A little squat just to keep you even. So a squat is needed to keep you even. Again, if I keep my knee kind of locked and my hip kind of locked, there's a popping up here. So that's
So
very good awareness. Yeah.
Sensei, at risk of being too detailed, when you come back on your back leg, like I tend to be loaded on the ball of my foot and my heel touches, you don't relinquish that to come back. Like the bend, it's not coming back on the heel. Is this, or it is in sitting down that you're actually loading weight into your heel? Because for sure, I've got a little bit of flexibility challenge in one ankle related to that, but when it works, when it feels like it's working, there's a spring loadedness that comes and coming back. But to me, again, that seems to require the ball of the foot to use that to go forward, versus like sitting down doesn't mean sinking back.
Okay. So yes, very good. Okay, so let's talk about that. So that's important too. Going back, sitting back doesn't mean falling back or leaning back. That's an important distinction. I would say that it does create more pressure in the heel. Now, you don't want to have the front of the foot or ball of the foot get light or empty, because that will probably mean that you're falling back a little bit, leaning back. But I would say that it loads up the heel. And I still feel full contact of the bottom of my foot, full contact, but more weight towards the heel. So those are important details. Once, especially because if you're being aware of those things and noticing those things and wondering about those things, that's when those details become very, very important, because you can now refine them. So yes, come back. Make sure you're not going to the back edge of the heel or where the toes start to pop up. That's being weight too much back, and you're either leaning back or you're about ready to teeter back. So you think of the full flatness of the foot on the ground, but you'll feel the heel loaded more. Also, along that same line, same theme there that was just brought up, when you come back, you don't want the front foot certainly to physically not pop up. You don't want the toes to come up off the ground. You don't want even the front half of the foot or the ball of the foot to pop up to become light. So not only not physically curling off the ground, you don't want that front foot to become floaty. It's like the front foot is suctioned. It's not heavy because there's very little weight on it. 99% of the weight's on the back leg, but the front foot is like suctioned. Full contact, fullness, full connection to the ground, not becoming light or floaty, and definitely not physically pulling the toes, peeling the toes off the ground. So now spend the next few rotations here, next few repetitions, being mindful of your front foot. Probably there is some level of peeling the toes off the ground physically, or even if it's not physically happening, some floatiness. So that's should be fully in contact with the ground, suction to the ground. It's light, there's no weight, hardly any weight there, but the contact is full. So definitely check that out. That's another detail that usually doesn't come up. So these thoughts and these questions are bringing up these other details, these extra details that ultimately become very important. So that's in line with that further refinement. Front foot stays full, even when your weight's 100% back. Of course, by the same token, when I'm forward, I don't want the back heel to pop off physically, certainly not, but I don't want it even to become light or floaty. It's also suctioned to the ground as I come forward. Another detail that this brings up as well is that the weight shift is 100% back, 99%, 100% back. The front weight shift is maximum 70%. So front movement, 60% to 70%, back movement approached 100%, but notice when you are compromising yourself, not 100% this way, Now my front foot is floaty and up, and I've compromised my structure and my alignment. 100% back, but I compromised the structure and alignment and connection to the ground. That's no good. Approach 100%, keeping all those qualities. Let me know if you have any other questions or comments about this kind of action. Now, this is getting a little bit energetic and more advanced, so the more experienced people can start to have this part of your awareness. This fullness I talk about in the feet, even when there's no weight on it, you can consciously, intentionally connect that to your hands. I mean the fullness in your hands. You can place the fullness that's in the feet to the fullness in your hands. You can create the fullness in the hands from the fullness in the feet. So like I said, I don't want my front foot empty or floaty when my weight is back. And same with the back foot when I'm forward. I don't want it floaty or empty. I don't want my hands or my arm movement or my upper body to be floaty and empty in a disconnected sense. I don't want it to be floaty. My hands, my arms and hands are connected, full. Just like my front foot is full, even when my weight is back, fully connected, suctioned. You have the same sort of quality energetically in your hands. Because I can be connected down here, but my arms are kind of floaty and separate. You can place the same sort of fullness into your hands. This will make sense to some of you. If it doesn't make sense to you right now, it's totally fine. Eventually it will, and eventually you'll feel it. Any comments or questions? Okay. Sayuendo. This is in the 9th Q program. Shift the weight, 1, 2, shift the weight, 1, 2. This is very much related to what we're doing. And let's consciously make that relationship, that connection. When I shift the weight to one side, most of the weight's on one side. I don't want the other foot, the light leg, the light foot, to become floaty. I certainly don't want it to physically peel off the ground, because then basically I'm like this. So even when we shift the weight, 1, 2, 1, 2, you want the other foot suction to the ground, not light, not peeling off. And for this beginning level of this, we want 2 beats. Basically, that's just a training methodology to get us to release and relax. First time, we're probably tight, uptight. The second beat, we get a chance to release more. So 1, 2, 3, 4. We want to sink into what's called the hip waist. This crease here, we want to sink here. Again, watch out for popping out. I mentioned that with the forward and back weight shift. Sideways, watch out if the ball joint is kind of popping out a little bit. We want to sink down, straight down the hip, not out the outside of the hip. The arms are simply doing this Minucci feeling, extended out. Again, this fullness right out to the hands is full of extension, full of expansion. That's why the arms are way out here, not collapsed in. So this bottom arm is across, not short. And then, in a sense, the arms are not moving. It's just the body moving and turning. Now check out that lighter leg. That foot should be suctioned to the ground. Notice if you're popping the hip out one way or the other. Notice your alignment. The weight should be sinking right down this axis here. Right down this vertical axis, not leaning over. And then we add a movement, right? Footwork. The footwork's going to be step in, step out. 1, 2. Step in, step out. 1, 2. Again, without bobbing up and down. We keep our knees bent, hanging from the string, or weight falling through the legs and feet. If this is new for you, do just the footwork first. Step in, step out. 1, 2. Step in, step out. Sink, sink. Arms are moving just because of the body. hips are hanging. Now, in particular with movement, we'll tend to get floaty. See that back foot? It's not really a back foot, right? It's on the side. So it's not here, it's up here, but it tends to get a little floaty. It comes off the ground when we have movement, right? Because we have physical momentum. We have physical momentum taking us this way. So watch if that's pulling that leg and foot off the ground. You want the momentum to go into your hip, down, 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 turn, turn, turn to go down, not turn to pop off, not turn to lean. So notice when you have movement, you have momentum. Is that making you lose contact with the ground? That foot should still be suctioned. Full contact with the ground.
Sensei,
Yeah.
I have a question. I'm feeling a lot of, when I let go, twist like in the rib area. Do I want that to happen?
Here?
Yeah.
Okay. Okay, great question. So we want to turn but not twist. So let me illustrate, maybe from the side. Here, I don't want to be twisting. I want to turn the hip. This is why I'm really emphasizing sink into the hip here. Sink into the hip. This is really great this came up because if I don't have a very conscious, dynamic, and physical think, you will have to be twisting here. Now, if you can imagine, this is actually, again, a really important point. If I'm just twisting, I'm weight upper side, I'm using my upper body. And it's only my upper body. If I'm emphasizing the hip, it's the entire body, and I have a groundingness. In fact, every turn is also a think of grounded, connected, solid, stable. If I'm just twisting and feeling it in the ribs, that means you're only accessing the upper body and you're not grounded, you're up. So that's an important refinement. Think, sink. So don't twist, turn the hip. So that's something probably everybody can work on consciously. Am I twisting or am I turning from the hip and sinking and grounding? Very important. And sinking and grounding sends the arms up. Excellent. Okay, let's bring that into our misogi, into our breathing. Expanding out from the center as we breathe in, settling back to the center as we breathe out. Body opening, spine growing long, allowing space, extra space between the vertebrae. Let the hips hang. Let the body open. Okay, let's bow out. Domo arigatou gozaimasu. Thank you very much. Great questions. In fact, I'd like to work on some of the aspects of the questions more so in another class. The twisting rather than turning,